Hey y'all, so this is take two because I wasn't sure if I was doing this correctly, but here we are. And I'm doing this on my phone because my laptop was freaking out. So here we go. My name's Ashley Holland. I'm one of the assistant directors for student engagement at the University of Virginia. I use she, her, hers pronouns. And I am going to talk to you all today a little bit about grief, collective grief that we're feeling, as well as some coping mechanisms for that. I haven't mentioned this yet, but I am a huge Disney nerd, and so that's why I did the Inside Out GIF as well as the photo for the event. So if you're a Disney nerd, say hey. Want to talk a little bit about grief, because I don't know if there is really a conversation being had around grief right now. And I've been kind of absorbed in some articles and some podcasts talking about it, so that's kind of my world. I just don't know if we're talking about that on a larger scale. I do want to put a caveat on this in that I am not a licensed counselor. Some of the things I'm going to be talking about are things, like I said, that I heard from podcasts or that I read. But by no means am I a licensed counselor in any sort of way. I also want to say that it's okay not to be okay right now. The world, it feels in a lot of ways, and I'm going to talk about some of the feelings that I've been having recently, but I think in a lot of ways it feels kind of like the world is ending, or the world that we knew is over. And so how are we dealing with that? So I listened to a podcast episode from Brené Brown recently on grief and finding meaning. And so she was speaking with a grief therapist, talking about who worked with the woman who came up with the 5 stages of grief, and ultimately they came up with a 6th stage. But the 5 stages of grief are denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance, and the 6th stage is meaning making, or making meaning. So we're all dealing with this collective loss of the world that we knew. The world that we knew is now gone forever, is what this grief therapist was saying. Some of you all may be too young to remember 9/11 or what the world felt like on 9/11. But prior to that, airport security looked very different, and so now we'll talk about do you remember how airports were before 9/11? That this therapist was saying that we will say that about this pandemic, and I feel like some people are probably going like, grief? How? What? What do you mean grief? But grief is the loss of something or someone. So a breakup is the loss of a relationship. If you are out of a job, you've lost the job. And I think for us right now, collectively, is this loss of the world as we knew it. It's just like every other loss. We didn't know what we had until it was gone. And we're trying to find ways to virtually hold each other's hands and comfort each other while practicing social distancing. This isn't going to be forever. It will end. I really appreciate the metaphor of there's not a dark night that doesn't end, or a dark night is going to end eventually. There will be light at the end of it, and I think that hope is really important to hold on to. But I don't know about y'all, I just want to have normal back. The world that it was, that we had before this, I'm really feeling this. I'm feeling like things are kind of out of control, or at least I definitely was a week or two ago when we didn't know as UVA employees if we were going, at least in student affairs, we didn't know if we were going to continue to come into work or if we were going to be sent home to work remotely. So just a lot of things felt kind of out of control. I broke down yesterday and cried. I happened to watch James Corden did a video where he put together a video of different people from the original cast of Dear Evan Hansen. I'm also a big musical nerd. And so these folks were singing a song talking about You Will Be Found, and the power of like no one being alone. Like, we're not alone. We have to lift each other up. We have to be there for each other. And I just like broke down and sobbed a little bit. And I think that was the first time that I had really cried since all of this kind of started, and feeling again like we had lost our sense of normal. So I'd love to hear from you all around feelings that you're having right now, whether that's fear, concern, anxiety, worry, whatever that may be. If you feel comfortable sharing that or sharing narratives related to that, I think it's important for us to share and to normalize some of this, because this is very abnormal for us right now. So if anyone has anything they want to share, please feel free to. Like I said, I'm feeling somewhat out of control. There's the loss of physical connection with people. I'm a big hugger. So whenever you all come back to UVA, please come by my office in the PAC and give me a hug. Would love nothing more. We've lost routine. Some folks have lost work. We've lost gathering for meals, for worship, for community, numerous other things that I'm sure you all can name that we have lost. And I think if we don't name that in some way, then it can be hard for us to feel it, or we don't fully feel it. I think something else that we all have been doing is comparing losses, and Brené also has a podcast which you can listen to on Spotify. I think it's on her website too, about comparative loss. So like someone who has lost a child comparing to someone who has lost a spouse, comparing to someone that lost a pet. Like, I think that does a disservice, because the worst loss is always your loss, is what this grief therapist was talking about. And I wish I hadn't deleted his name. I think his last name, I think it's David Kessler, but someone feel free to look that up and tell me if I'm wrong. But he says that the worst loss is always your loss, and that we do a disservice to ourselves and to others if we try to compare that in some sort of way. And he also says that grief is messy, and that this time is messy. I'm sure you all can relate to that in trying to find new routines, or not being ready yet to get into a new routine. I think the last couple of weeks I felt like that time between Christmas and New Year's, where I didn't know like what day it was or what was going on or anything like that. I felt like I had lost track of time in some ways. And I was part of my job, one of the programs that we've continued is the Community Matters series. And when classes were meeting on grounds and everything was running in our former normal, we met once a week down at a local restaurant in Charlottesville, and had conversation with community members. And so we were talking last night, and it was a licensed therapist that was on there, and she was saying that like fatigue and people feeling tired is very normal right now. Waking up in the middle of the night with anxiety and worry is very normal right now, because everything feels so kind of out of control. And I promise I'm not just going to do like doom and gloom. I am going to give some tips for how to get through this. But I think the thing, one of the things I really took away from this podcast was like we have to talk about it, and we have to feel it in order to move forward. Something else to note about grief is that grief must be witnessed, but we're all grieving. So like, how do we hold space for each other while we're grieving? And they talked about on this podcast, hey Michelle, talked on this podcast about, we have to support each other, and we have to like really be in community with one another. This grief therapist was talking about how he lives on a street in Los Angeles and doesn't know any of his neighbors, or didn't know any of his neighbors, and now they're all in like a text group and saying, well, what about the older man up the street who needs toilet paper? Like, can someone get that for him and drop it off? And so I think the community aspect in this is really important, and holding each other up and supporting each other during this time is really crucial. The stages with grief are kind of loose and not linear. Like you don't necessarily, like you can go back and grief comes in waves. I'm sure you all have heard that metaphor before. So knowing that like this is an ongoing thing and it really only gets better with time, unfortunately. Hey, Duran. So how do we make meaning? How do we find meaning in all of this, in this grief that we're all collectively feeling? This therapist talks about, you know, you may be thinking like, yeah, right, like that's not going to happen. What do you mean make meaning? Like what sort of meaning can come from something like this, that so many folks are feeling such sadness and grief during this time? But he talks about in our darkest moments, we find the light. Sometimes folks may try to find meaning too early on in their grief journey. So being mindful of that. The meaning is not in the loss. I thought this was really powerful. The meaning is not in the loss. The meaning is in what we do after. So it's in us. That's where the meaning lies. That's what we can create. He also says that your loss is not a blessing or a test or a gratitude. It just happens. Loss happens in our world. Things happen. We lose things. We have to grieve. And then we have to move forward. And I think that's where gratitude comes in. So early on, there may not be gratitude, or your form of gratitude is like getting out of bed and taking a shower and taking care of yourself and being grateful for that. So starting small. They also talked about naming meaningful moments. So if you're like having a really great conversation with someone was kind of what they named, because Brené and Dr. Kessler were having this moment of talking about grief and processing through things, and it seemed like at one point Brené is left speechless by Dr. Kessler, and so it seemed like the two of them were like that was a meaningful moment for them. So naming things, I think, is also important during this time. You can't find meaning in a pandemic during the pandemic, but we can maybe find meaning together and lean on one another. I also want to say that like mental work is work, and I think a lot of this is mental as we're going and processing through this, but also noting that like if we're processing grief or traumas, it's physically taxing. It can be physically exhausting, and so noting that like that's okay, and taking care of yourself. So figuring out what those systems are that you have in place, that can support you, that you can lean on. And if you're feeling like you don't know what those are, you don't know where to start with that, like please feel free to reach out to me. There are other staff members that are in this Facebook group. Please feel free to reach out to them. You all can find our contact information on the website. You could also, like, I'm not opposed if you want to send me a Facebook message, like however you want to reach out is totally fine. So switching gears a little bit, and trying to think of ways to kind of, obviously we want to feel these sad feelings because that's how we heal from them and that's how we move on. And at the same time, looking for some of the positive things and some of the joys for when it does feel like, oh my God, the world feels like it's crashing down around me. How do I move forward in this? So some things that I have seen that have been super positive recently. John Krasinski created this Some Good News video. I don't know if it's going to be a recurring thing, but he had Steve Carell on there, and they just kind of talked about The Office a little bit. I know some people aren't Office fans, some people are, but that he like celebrated a teenager that had her last round of chemo, and as she pulled onto her street, like neighbors and friends had banners and signs, and they were honking and cheering for her. Like, that's really positive and uplifting. I've heard several folks talk about elementary school teachers, high school, middle school teachers, like doing parades through neighborhoods to like wave to their students and say hey and tell them that they love them, because I think for a lot of folks that are in school, like they didn't know, again, that's that loss, right? Like you didn't know that was going to be the last time that you went to class, that you saw your professor, your teacher, your classmates. So I think that was really sweet. I've seen lots of like fun animal videos. I was reading something recently about Harry Potter at home. So J.K. Rowling, though she's made some problematic comments recently, created some stuff for folks to be able to do Harry Potter things at home. I'm also a big Harry Potter nerd. I'm just kind of a nerd in general, y'all. But those were some like positive things. So I would ask if you all have found positive things to share them either in the comments or in the Facebook group. I think we've said that like the intention and the hope with this group is that you all interact with each other and lean on each other's support and all of that good stuff. So if there are things that you find that you want to share, I'd also be interested to know what you all are doing for fun. So for me, my partner and I just moved into a house about 30 minutes outside of Charlottesville. So for me, fun during this time is going to be like getting that organized and putting things in their proper place, which will be a good distraction from, or a good way to shift my thinking when, again, things feel super overwhelming. Going for walks is also something that's fun for me. I'd also be interested to know like TV shows and movies that you all are watching. I know Tiger King is blowing up and has kind of gone viral. I would highly recommend it. Is wild. If you want to talk about it, I'm happy to have a conversation. It's wild, and I don't mean that pun intentionally, but there you go. My partner and I watched the first season of The Office the other day. I'm a big Grey's Anatomy fan, so I've been watching that. Also, like I said, I'm a big Disney nerd, so I've been watching Disney movies. My partner and I put Anchorman on last night to just like have something kind of mindless on in the background for us to be able to laugh and chuckle. I'd also be interested to know if anyone's doing any reading for fun and what those books might be, because I'm always looking for book recommendations. I'm reading the book Vox right now. I don't know who the author is off the top of my head, but would highly recommend that. Kelly is seconding walks. Thank you, Kelly. I'm also reading Rising Strong by Brené Brown. Would highly recommend. And I will post some of these resources in the chat after I have finished this live video. John says, The Simpsons have been on air for like 30 years. Yeah, that's accurate. And I think you can stream them somewhere. It's not just on TV. Music, what music are folks listening to? I'd be interested in that. I was listening to the Spotify work from home playlist earlier today. I'm also a big fan of Lake Street Dive. I've also been listening to musicals. If there are any podcasts that you all are listening to, I'd be interested in that. I'm not really a big podcast person, but I'm willing to take recommendations. And one of the things that I want to close with, or I guess the thing I want to close with, is the Brené and Dr. Kessler talked about like what are you deeply grateful for right now, and I think gratitude can be one of those things when like, and this is when there's no longer a pandemic. Taking time to write down things that you're grateful for. There's a really great video, maybe I'll post that, of people, I think Soul Pancake did it, but there were like folks that came in, there was an interviewer, and they were like, we want you to write a letter to your hero and tell them like why they're your hero and why you're grateful for them. And this video makes me cry every time, y'all. I might like tear up talking about it. It's fine. I cry a lot. Good things. And so then after they write the letter, they have to call the person that they wrote the letter about and talk to them. And I think there was some study around like their mood. So they took a pre-survey of like, how are you feeling today, et cetera, what's your mood like? And then afterwards, their mood had drastically improved. So taking time to write down things that you're grateful for. I work with a personal trainer, and she kind of challenged us to write down like 3 things every day that you're grateful for. Just to have gratitude kind of at the forefront of your mind. So I went ahead and did a list. I'm going to share it with y'all. And then I'm going to pop off your screen, post some things in the comments, and I'm happy to chat afterwards. But things that I am grateful for today. I'm grateful for my health. I'm grateful for my partner. I'm grateful for the fact that we bought a new house. I'm grateful for warm socks. I am grateful for coffee. I'm grateful for having enough food to stay fed and to stay well. I'm thankful for Zoom calls with colleagues, doing virtual happy hour with friends, chatting with students over Zoom and other platforms. I'm very grateful for having a job that allows me to work remotely. I'm at my apartment right now. And similarly, having the fact that my partner's job is something that allows him to work remotely. The fact that we're still allowed to go outside, and that I think a silver lining with all of this is that it's happening during the springtime, and so there's warm weather for us to be able to go outside and enjoy, versus if it were cold, I think I would be less inclined to go outside. So feeling very thankful for that. My mom is in her late 50s, my dad's in his early 60s, and they're both in good health, and they're social distancing, and they're staying at home, and they're ordering things to be delivered to them, and they're not going out to the store, and I'm very thankful that they're healthy and safe and well. My sister and her fiance live up in Northern Virginia. They're also healthy and safe and well, so I'm very grateful for that. I'm thankful for fresh laundry. We moved and we used washcloths and things to pack boxes, and so I've been able to do some laundry, and I just love the smell of fresh laundry. So those are things that I just kind of sat down, spent a few minutes, and reflected on in terms of what I was grateful for. And some of them are silly, like warm socks and coffee, and some of them are a little more serious. So I hope you all enjoyed this. I hope it was helpful. Like I said, my name's Ashley Holland. I'm one of the assistant directors for student engagement, and we are here for you all. I think I can say that on behalf of the entire student engagement team and beyond, staff members at the university. We care about y'all, we love y'all, and we hope that you're all doing well. And if we can be a resource for you or help you process through this grief in any sort of way, please let us know. I don't know why Duran sent the angry face, but okay. I hope you all have a good night and a great rest of your week, and we'll see you soon.